everybody to the For the Gambia podcast. I'm your host, Pastor Seka, here with my brother and my co-host, Mr. Moto Thomas. We are live in Raleigh, North Carolina today. Have another Gambian by the name of Dr. Jarra Jagne. Dr. Jarra Jagne is a veterinarian by profession. She's a senior extension associate at the Department of Population Medicine and Diagnostic Science at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. Her field of research involves common diseases of poultry, including the avian influenza, also known as the bird flu, H5N1, and also Newcastle disease virus, which is a contagious viral bird disease, Mycoplasma gallisepticum, which causes chronic respiratory disease in chickens, infectious bronchitis, infectious bursal disease. Without further ado, we will just go ahead and introduce Dr. Jarra Jagne. Dr. Jarra Jagne, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So just like we do with everybody, we will just start off with you telling us who you are, for our audience who may not know who you are, your background, especially back home, some of the schools that you've been to, your childhood days, your family, just for the folks out there who may not know who you are.
Okay, my name is Jarra Jagne, and I was born to Alaji Chapra Jagne and Ajara Fatu Foon, and in Banjul. In those days, it was Bathurst, Gambia. A few years after, I would say a few years before Gambia gained its independence. So I'm not a spring chicken. That's what she said. I'm from the older generation. But I grew up in Banjul, and I had my first taste of education by being enrolled in Islamic school at the age of 3. And a little bit after that, my mom also enrolled me in what was the first probably nursery school in Gambia. It was run by Mrs. Orlandau, wife of prominent Dr. Peter Ndau. And it was very rare in those days to find many kids going to nursery school. So it was like a pre-kindergarten, and it was a wonderful school. I had a few of my cousins who went to the school. I know quite a lot of now very prominent Gambians who had their start at that school. And from there, I entered Methodist preparatory and kindergarten school when I was probably around 5 and a half. And from there, after the common entrance, I went to Gambia High School, and that's where I finished my secondary education in the 6th form. And from there, I worked and went to school at the Department of Livestock Services, attended a livestock training school. It was a 2-year training program, and it was a very practical type of training because we were in the school, but at the same time, we were working alongside the veterinarians that were teaching us. So that was, I think, a very, very good training. And soon after I finished my training, I worked a little bit, maybe for about a year, and then I decided to come to the United States to further my education. And I attended Colorado State University, got a bachelor's degree in biology, and then I started a master's degree in microbiology. But I only did 1 year of that, and I was able to get a scholarship to attend veterinary school. So I was accepted to 4 veterinary schools in the United States, and I chose to come to Cornell University, where I'm now teaching. So this is where I did my veterinary training. But I did go back to Gambia after my training. I went back for about 3.5 years and worked in the Department of Livestock Services, and decided to come back for even further training and specialization. Not all veterinarians in the U.S. do that, but I had done some work in my third year of vet school in Gambia, studying Newcastle disease virus in Gambian poultry, especially in village poultry. So I decided to pursue that as my specialty. So I went to the University of Pennsylvania and joined the Laboratory of Avian Medicine and Pathology. I did 2 years there, specializing as a poultry veterinarian. That does not mean that I am still not versed in veterinary aspects of sheep and goats and cattle and dogs and cats. I can still do that. This just happens to be my specialty. But I know if I go back to Gambia, I'm going to be a general vet once more, because we cannot afford to specialize like we can in the U.S. In the U.S., a lot of the veterinary and medical professions are very, very specialized, highly specialized. So everyone is very narrow into their specialty. But in the background, I always know I will go back home and I will still want to practice general veterinary medicine and not just deal with poultry. Right. So I think that's probably it in a nutshell.
All right, that's great. So if I was to ask you now, why do you do what you do? What was the reason or the motivation behind you choosing this field of study?
Well, growing up in the Gambia in the 1960s, and former President Sadauda Jarra was the president, but I also knew that he was a veterinarian because people talked about it. And so that really fascinated me. And I also had an uncle, Dr. Walindau, who was a veterinarian too. So I used to go to the Department of Livestock Services to visit. Initially, actually, what triggered my first interest was a school visit. I had gone with some members of my class from elementary school, and we had visited the veterinary services. And in those days, there used to be some British vets, European vets there. There were very few Gambian vets. Dr. Ndao was one of them. And so I was very, very fascinated with what they were doing. I was like, wow, I didn't know animals can have doctors. I was, of course, knew that humans had doctors, but animals. And so I was just fascinated by that. And then throughout my high school years, I worked towards that. I will go in, like, for example, during the summer, once in a while, I would go there and visit again and see what they were doing. So by the time I finished sixth form, my mind was set that I wanted to be a veterinarian. I had a lot of people who discouraged me and asked me why I wanted to be a veterinarian. Why couldn't I be a human doctor? and that's just a Gambian mentality. Why do you want to be a cow doctor? They will ask me. And I said, well, I just think it's fascinating to treat animals. They can't talk. You have to be really good. And we veterinarians believe that we are the better doctors because our patients don't talk. We have to be very good at determining what's wrong with them, just asking their owners maybe. But apart from that, we have to have very, very strong diagnostic skills to diagnose animal diseases. And we are also not working on one species, the human species. No, we work on several. So I have to study about dogs and cats and horses and mice and snakes and donkeys and chickens. And so I have to know about all these different species and their peculiar diseases. So it's not very easy. Actually, it's more difficult to get into veterinary school in the United States than it is to get into a medical school.
Thank you very much. If you're just logging in or joining us or listening to the show, the podcast, we having a another important guest, of course, as you might have been aware of, this program is geared towards promoting our own, what Gambia has. There's so much of hidden talent out there that people don't know. Um, Dr. Jagne, I just want you to touch on something that is so dear to me, especially living in the United States here and you being a veterinarian. I'm sure you might have been aware of so many of certain videos that are circulated on social media about the processing of chicken, the chicken we eat. I saw one on YouTube, and to tell you the truth, for a whole week I even discussed it with my friend here. For 1 week I abstained from eating chicken, the way it is processed. Tell us a little bit more for a lay person like me who just goes to a fast food and just order a fried chicken and eat. How this process is made. We're made to understand that everything is hormonized, everything, all this stuff they're giving like hormones, and that is not good for the human body. Tell us a little bit more about that.
No, I don't think that's true. I work in the poultry industry. I actually worked for a poultry genetics company that does work with breeders, but more for eggs than for meat. But I'm also very familiar with the broiler industry that raises chickens for meat. What has happened over the years is that with genetics, they have been able to produce a chicken that grows really fast. In the 1960s, most poultry in the United States was what we called a dual purpose. They were bred for both meat and eggs. And then towards the end of the 1960s, there was a divergence, and then they developed a breed, a broiler breed. This is all through genetics, genetic research. They developed a breed that only will give meat, and then there were breeds that were specialized just for eggs. So you have layer breeds, egg-laying breeds, and then you have the broiler breeds, which are the meat breeds. And so over the years, since then, genetic companies have worked on these birds, on their genetics, to make them grow really fast. Not only to make them grow really fast, but to also make sure that in that time that they're growing, they don't eat too much. And their overall physical appearance has changed. They used to be a little bit taller. Now they're shorter because, you know why? Because Americans love breast meat. So the geneticists have worked only on increasing the breast of these chickens. So when you see them, they look really funny. They have these short legs, and then they have this big breast. Now, I can tell you probably maybe about 10 years ago, in the poultry industry, especially in the broiler industry, they used to use antibiotics, in small amounts of antibiotics in the feed that they used to call growth promoters. If you put the antibiotics in the feed, the chickens don't get sick. They have only 39 days to grow. From the time you put them down as 1 day of age, you go and pick them up again at 39 days of age, and they're already 4.5 pounds. So that means there's a fast growth rate, really fast. So they do suffer because of that fast growth rate. They have a lot of leg problems. They have a disease that's called secondary pulmonary hypertension, where they have basically a heart disease. Their heart is too small to pump blood around the body because their breasts are so big. They're eating so much. They grow so fast. So there's a lot of pressures on the chicken itself. So because of those pressures, that's stress. Then they will be more vulnerable to viral and bacterial diseases. So to prevent that, they used to put antibiotics in the feed of broilers to prevent those infections, and it worked. But there has been an outcry about antibiotic resistance in humans, and there have been so many studies done, so much research, that some of it could be coming from the food we eat, not just from chickens, but from other things. So there's been an outcry from consumers, from consumer groups against the chicken industry, against the broiler industry for putting antibiotics in feed. So over the years, all of the major broiler companies have come out and announced that they're not using antibiotics in the feed anymore. Now, that does not mean that when the chickens get sick, they will not treat them. They can put the antibiotics in the water for maybe 2 days, 5, usually it's 5 days, to treat them. But for the broiler industry, it's quite a conundrum because that 39 days, they have to keep those chickens healthy. Otherwise, they're going to lose all of them. There are some diseases that will just come and wipe out all these chickens. Now, everyone is going towards this organic and antibiotic-free labels. So they are not using antibiotics in the feed anymore. And the Food and Drug Administration recently came out, starting this January, with what we call the Veterinary Feed Directive. Before, poultry farmers could go anywhere, to the agway, anywhere, and pick up antibiotics and put it in their feed for their chickens. But they cannot do that anymore without the prescription of a veterinarian. And these antibiotics that the FDA is looking at are antibiotics that are used for human medicine.
So, if I may interject, for the purpose of clarity, there is no health concerns for people who, when they see those kind of videos circulating on social media, to be alarmed about what they eat as far as the chicken is concerned?
I don't think so. Chicken in the United States, I can tell you, I would be more scared to eat these types of chickens, broilers that are grown in Africa. Not the indigenous African chicken. I'm not talking about a local chicken. I'm talking about the fast-growing chickens that are raised in Africa, because there's no controls. Because I've worked in many African countries, and I see how they abuse antibiotics and use them for chickens. In the U.S., it's not like that. We have rules here. We have regulations here. The FDA has put in place the Veterinary Feed Directive, and no poultry farmer in the United States can go just anywhere and pick up antibiotics to put in their chicken feed. They have to have a prescription from a veterinarian, when before they did not need to. And so in that way, the government is trying to control the use of antibiotics, not in chicken feed especially, because that's usually where it's easier for them to put it in the feed. So now they have to have a veterinarian decide whether the chickens really need the antibiotics, whether they're sick, they need to be treated, and that's the only reason they will write a prescription. If not, they're not going to write a prescription just because they want it in the feed and to help them grow, because they call it a growth promotant, because it helps them grow a little bit, because it keeps them safe from disease. So if they don't have diseases, they can grow very well.
Oh, that's great. Dr. Jagne, just for the sake of clarity, especially for our folks back home, because what we call organic over here are the things that they eat over there every day.
I know.
and it is very expensive over here. And if you ask them, they want to come here and they admire our food, not knowing that they have the best food out there. Because
they have better food.
Right.
The only thing we don't have over there is maybe here they do a lot of breeding, a lot of research, a lot of genetic testing on all kinds of plants and animals. And to tell you the truth, I would rather eat the small eggplant that's grown in Gambia than the big genetically modified eggplant that I can find here in the supermarket. I think the only problem we have with our products is sometimes the quality is not as good. There's lots of insect problems with vegetables, for example.
The preservation,
Our local chicken is very tasty, but it's not a good producer of meat, nor is it a good producer of eggs. So we haven't worked really hard to improve the genetics of those birds to make them produce a better tasting meat. Well, I think it's good tasting, but just the amount of meat the chicken can put on and the amount of eggs they can lay. So we need to do a lot more work on the genetic side for our local chicken. But I think our local chicken is really good. When I go home, I really I tell people that bring food for me or make food for me, I don't like this imported chicken.
Now you've raised something very important, and I think I'm learning within this short period of time. I'm learning a lot, and I confess this to my co-presenter before we had you on air, that science and maths was something I hated in school and in college. It was something I when it comes to the health field, I was always a backbencher. I never loved it in school or college. But you raised something important, and I've seen the difference. Our chicken back home tastes way different compared to what we have here or the poultry ones.
Yeah,
And
of course.
and you mentioned about the genetics. So what's the reason behind that?
Well, those chickens, for the most part, what we call extensively raised chickens. People just let them wander around. They just pick up anything. They pick up worms. They pick up bugs, insects. So that's basically what they eat. And sometimes people would throw them some chalk, some grain, a little bit of rice here and there. So they're just wandering around the village, just picking up anything. And that makes their meat very tough and also a little bit gamey, what we will call the gamey. But to me, I think they taste good. It takes a long time to cook them.
Yes.
If you have a pressure cooker, that's okay. But there are some countries that have succeeded in using their local chickens and doing a lot of breeding to bring them to a really good production state. For example, in Egypt, when you go to Egypt, you have several breeds of chickens that are local Egyptian breeds. One of them is the Fayumi. It's called the Fayumi breed. They call them baladi chickens, and they produce a lot of eggs. Just as many eggs as this improved poultry that we find in the US or in Europe. And you go to Bangladesh, you find the same thing. They have their own local breeds. They have a Sonali breed. They have a Deshi breed. And they produce very well. But it's because they've put in the work. Genetic work takes a long time. It took decades and decades for them to produce those chickens. But they can still get that traditional good taste, but the bird meat is not tough, and yet they can also lay a lot of eggs. So I think those are the types of breeds we need to look at if we're interested in improving our poultry. We can bring these exotic breeds, but with the exotic breeds, you have to feed them a specific type of feed. For them to lay eggs, you have to feed them a specific type of feed for them to grow fast, to produce meat. And we don't have that in Gambia. We don't have the infrastructure for that. So the people that are raising chickens in Gambia have to go to Senegal to buy the feed, and that's why it's very, very expensive. But it's a great way to make an income. Raising chickens in Nigeria, almost every household raises chickens. They have a lot of what we call peri-urban agriculture, and most of that peri-urban agriculture is poultry production. People will raise maybe 200, 300 birds in their backyard for egg production, and when it comes towards Christmas time, you will see them raising the broilers because people buy a lot of chickens. So the demand for chicken is very, very high in Africa, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. And it's going to increase as more and more people enter the middle class. There's going to be a need for protein. We've seen the same thing happen in Asia. We've seen it happen, of course, in the United States. It happened a long time ago. So chicken is is the cheapest meat you can find here. But the chicken actually overcame pork as the number one meat, I think about a few years ago. It's the number one meat in the world. There's nowhere in the world where you can find a chicken, except I ask people this question: do you know where in the world you don't find any chickens? There's one country in the world where you don't find any chickens.
Which country is that?
It's a very small country. It's a trick question because it's the Vatican. Yeah. The Vatican is considered a country, but there's no chickens.
Yeah, but the Vatican is in Italy, right?
It's in Italy, but it's its own country.
So how come they don't have? So how come they don't have chicken? Is it a religious thing?
No. It's just a very small place, and people tending to their religious duties. They don't have time to raise chickens. So I've promised I'm going to send the Pope some chickens.
I'm sure he will appreciate that.
We will tell the Pope that there are no chickens in the Vatican. So hopefully this Pope that we have right now, I'm sure will be the type of Pope that will introduce chickens into the Vatican.
Yes, he's a very liberal guy. So
he is.
And I just want to run through your professional career right now, from the time that you went back to Gambia in 93 through 95. No, from 1990 through 93, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, yeah.
Can you just give us little highlights about that? And after that, how did you get to where you are today?
Well, after my veterinary education, I talked about this yesterday on another show. I got a scholarship to pursue my veterinary studies through the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, but that was through the Gambia government. So in my third year of studies, the president of Gambia at that time, who was Jarra, was invited to Cornell University to give an inaugural lecture for a lectureship named after one of the professors who was very, very instrumental in teaching students about tropical animal diseases. His name was Dr. Popinsek. So the first Popinsek lecture at Cornell University, it continues annually, every year we have it, was given by Sir Dauda. And he talked about the ITC, he talked about trypanosomiasis, and it was very well received. So when he came with his delegation, they convinced me that I should go back home after I graduate. And of course I was going to go back home. You know, I had a scholarship from the FAO through the Gambia government, but just to help me and convince me that I should go home. I used to work for the government before as a livestock assistant before I came. So they said, okay, when you left, you applied for study leave. So you can come back and reconnect. But you know what? We will pay you the 4 years, your salary as a livestock assistant for the 4 years that you spent studying at Cornell. So, well, of course, it wasn't that much money by American standards, but, you know, they didn't even have to do that. I was going to go back home anyway. So I went back home and worked as a senior veterinary officer for about three and a half years before I came back to do my specialty studies. So that was a really fun time. I really enjoyed working in Gambia. Of course, I did everything. You know, I had all these tourists bringing me cats that were hit on the road, all these dogs with broken legs, and donkeys that had been abandoned. So we were very busy. We were very busy, and I really enjoyed that work. I used to go out to farms. Farmers will come and bring their complaints. So we had transportation. So we'll go out to where the herds were and check what was going on. We had vaccination programs for rabies, vaccination programs for small ruminants, a disease called peste de petit ruminant. It's like rinderpest in cattle. So we were kept very busy. But I was very disappointed. I went back. I usually go back home quite a bit. And whenever I go to the Department of Livestock Services, it seems to get worse and worse. There's just nothing going on there. And I hope maybe this new government will pay attention to that sector, because we have a lot of people that raise livestock in Gambia. It's just as important as crop agriculture.
So from your experience and in your opinion also, what do you think needs to be done to revive that livestock, department back home?
Yeah, first of all, we need to probably have like experts to really sit down. The problem we don't do back home is you have to sit down and look at what the problem is. You have to sit and say, okay, what's going on in this department? What is our mission? What kind of goals can we set? We have a large cattle population. We have lots of donkeys. We have lots of sheep and goats. And these are owned by Gambians. They're owned by Gambian farmers. But they're not in the best of health. You have to vaccinate, for example, for certain diseases. Are we doing that? How much vaccine are we providing, for example, to the veterinary office in Basse, or the veterinary office in Bansang, or the veterinary office in Brikama to take care of the farmers? Do we have enough vaccines? Do we have enough supplies? We need to help farmers, for example, at least with the nutrition of their animals. We used to order salt licks when I was there, and well before too. Order salt licks and offer them to the farmers at a very, very low price. Veterinary care is basically almost free. I know we used to charge, but it was very minimal, the charge that we made for treating animals. So I think there needs to be, first of all, like a committee set up of experts in animal health, animal husbandry, because we're not just talking about animal health per se. Veterinary medicine is not the same as animal science. People that do animal science work on the husbandry. They work on how well you feed the animal, how well the animal grows. Even their research is very different from what we do. We focus on disease. And there are lots of animal diseases that can go to humans too. So that's another thing with veterinary medicine. We need to work with the people in the public health sector. And in many, many African countries, including the Gambia, we used to do that. We used to have veterinary specialists who go to the abattoir and work with the public health people to do inspection of meat before sale. So I don't know whether that's still going on, but that used to be the way we did it. So there's so much we can do with our human health counterparts, because there's lots of animal diseases. In fact, the WHO says like 60% of disease in humans can be traced back to animals. So we have this concept now going around called the One Health concept, where we want to work with our human health counterparts to control certain diseases. And these diseases are called zoonotic diseases. There are a few that come from chickens to kill humans, like avian influenza, H5N1, highly pathogenic avian influenza. Newcastle disease is mildly zoonotic. There's a bacterial disease called salmonella that can go from chickens to humans, and it can cause very severe disease in humans, even death. So I think the veterinary services can be revamped. Of course, nothing can be revamped without money. There's always so much need for funds. And the veterinary services in many African countries have been neglected over the years. When we had those structural adjustment programs from the UN, not from the UN, I'm sorry, from the World Bank, the veterinary services was the first thing to go. So many countries neglected their veterinary services until we had these outbreaks of highly pathogenic avian influenza that started killing people in Asia, and then everyone started to pay attention. And then there was a huge project mounted by the UN, FAO, and also the US government to help countries combat avian influenza. Because if avian influenza is not controlled, it can get to the United States, it can get to these countries. And it's a very, very contagious and a very virulent virus that can kill people very, very quickly. So 50% of people that get highly pathogenic avian influenza end up dying. So luckily, it's a virus that is still in chickens, and it goes from chickens to humans. So it has not found a way to go from human to human, and that will be disastrous. So we need to make sure that it stays in the poultry population, or even eliminated from the poultry population before it can affect humans. So those kinds of things are the reasons why it's important for governments, not just the Gambia government, but many African governments, to pay attention to veterinary services. And in Gambia, you have to take baby steps when it comes to these things. I think the first thing is to convene a group of people that can come with bright ideas on how to go forward. I've been away from Gambia for a long time. I don't know what's happening on the ground. I have a bit of a feeling, but when I go to the veterinary services, I don't see much going on. There have been a few projects that have been associated with the department. I think that have worked well, but we cannot depend forever. We have to have our own strong services. I know neighboring Senegal, I worked with the veterinarians there too. When I was working for the U.S. government Stop AI project, I went to Senegal a lot and Mali. But the Senegalese are doing a really good job with their veterinary services. Of course, they have more funds and they have more veterinarians. In Gambia, the problem is there are not many people that study veterinary medicine. I think up to now, I don't think we even have 20 veterinarians in Gambia.
Wow.
So it's still a profession that many people shy away from. I always say this, it's not a very glamorous profession. You have to go to the herds. There are flies around. There are ticks all over the place. But I enjoy that kind of work. I enjoy going out in the field. And so we just have to get young people excited about veterinary medicine. And if we have more veterinarians, I think it will be great. I mean, we had a veterinarian as a president, the only president in the world who was a veterinarian. So Gambia should have been in the forefront of training veterinarians. But anyway, I can tell you when I was growing up, we had more cattle than people. So it has changed. Right. Now we have more people. But when I was growing up, wow, our cattle population was so high. It was very close to the human population.
Yeah, that's right. So now that is just what I wanted to ask you about, because you just touched on it, about getting more people into the profession of veterinary medicine. Now, it is mostly a female profession nowadays, because most of these universities, you go over there now, about 70 to 80% of the students in veterinary school are girls.
In the US.
Yes, in the US. Yes. That's in the US. So now back home, if I was to give you a child right now, for you to convince that child to get into veterinary medicine, I mean, because we all know that it is not the most intriguing profession, because most of these girls want to wear heels, wear their makeups, and go to work. Like how will you convince a girl to be just like what you said in the beginning, a cow doctor?
Well, I think it has to start from very early on, and the reason why in the U.S. we have a lot of these young women and men go into the veterinary profession is many of them some of them do come from farm backgrounds. They come from their parents raised cattle and so on. So we do have those type of people. We also have a lot of kids here in the U.S. that start doing what we call 4-H programs.
Yes.
A 4-H is like an agricultural type of club for kids. So 4-H encourages children to raise animals. They raise chickens, they raise goats, they have competitions, and it's not just animals. I mean, it's agriculture.
Yes.
In addition, also they learn how to do public speaking, just so many skills. And this is from a very early age. You have kids who are 5 years old who participate in 4-H programs. So I think that's where we need to start. And that's one of the ideas I have. If I go back home, I want to start a 4-H program for young people, especially young kids in the rural areas, because they are more connected with agriculture, more connected with animals. If I can get kids in the rural areas whose parents own cattle to be interested in veterinary medicine, I will be so happy, because I think they can go back and help their parents. They can go back and help their communities. And but everyone wants to go on a boat and go to Europe, But there's a lot of good prospects in raising animals for income. You can make a pretty good income raising animals, whether it's chickens, whether it's goats, sheep, and cattle.
Now that's what I was going to ask. Like how lucrative is this field of study? Because everything comes down to the numbers, everything comes down to money. Like how big is this business?
Well, let me tell you, I have a friend in Nigeria. He's a Nigerian veterinary doctor. And over the years, he has grown his business. He started out with chickens. And he has grown his business to be the biggest livestock business in Nigeria. He provides basically all the chicks. He owns the breeders, together with the former president Obasanjo. Obasanjo is a big poultry farmer in Nigeria. And this guy basically controls the poultry market in Nigeria. He sells chicks from the north all the way down to the south, to the east, to the west. He also branched out into pig farming. So now he sells also the breeds. In addition, he added fish farming. So he has fish hatcheries that produces the fingerlings that people use for fish farming. Fish farming is big in Nigeria. So this guy is a multimillionaire, I can tell you that. And he started out with chickens. He still owns a lot of chickens and basically controls the market. And even on a small scale, I have seen people make a good income. I mean, compared to what people are making now in Gambia. If I, for example, want to sponsor a woman, I'm always talking about doing this for women, encouraging them, setting them up together, up as cooperatives, to raise egg layers or to raise broilers. But I have to be there to be able to do that successfully. I think I can help them improve their income just by raising chickens. I've seen it done in Ghana. I've seen it done in many, many countries. So they're not going to be multimillionaires if they're doing it at that small scale. But I think it still will bring in a reasonable income where they'll be able to help pay for their children's school fees and some other things that the family needs.
And in this field, if let's say I'm listening and I'm an aspiring farmer, what are the do's and the don'ts when it comes to
yeah? There are many.
All right. If you can just break it down, the most important do's and the don'ts.
There are many. The thing is, when you want to go into a business that involves raising livestock, the first thing you have to worry about is disease.
Yes.
There are so many diseases that can affect livestock. So to combat these diseases, we have a lot of vaccines that are already available. So you don't need to go looking for them. You don't need to go starting from scratch to make a vaccine. All of the diseases that affect chickens, I would say 99% of them, we have vaccines, especially the viral diseases, because it's very easy to make a vaccine against the virus than it's easier to do against a bacteria. So first of all, you have to do that. Housing is very important. So it's not just the disease side. You have to look at the production side. You have to look at how you're raising them. Are you providing them with good housing? Are you providing them with good nutrition? Nutrition is the key for any of these improved breeds of chickens and goats and sheep and so on. You have to feed them well. And so the first problem that people in Gambia will face if they want to raise chickens, especially these improved breed of chickens, is that they cannot get good quality feed. If they can get it, it's going to be very expensive because that's the top, I would say, capital input into having a successful poultry farm. You have to have the feed. Even in the United States, the feed is number one capital input into poultry production. So you have to make sure you have a good supply of feed, a consistent supply of feed, good quality feed. And then you have to have good quality chicks if you're going to raise them from day old. And so that means that you have to have somewhere where you should be buying these chicks. And now people are getting them from Netherlands. They're flown in, or you can get them from Senegal. They have some really good hatcheries in Senegal. So it's not easy to set up like a poultry business. But some people are doing it, in Gambia, and they're being successful. There's a lot of ups and downs. They get a lot of parasites, for example, external parasites, lice and mites love chickens. Even in the United States, we see that as the number one problem, especially in the backyard chickens, not so much in the commercial chickens. So there's just a lot of disadvantages and advantages to going into this kind of business. I think raising ruminants might be a little bit easier, but they're a bigger animal and you need a lot more space. They also can die very quickly from diseases, so they have to be protected against a lot of diseases. You have to also pay attention to their feed. It's not just going and tying them out on the grass. They need a little bit of extra minerals and vitamins that you might probably have to buy. But I still think, despite all those daunting things that you have to do for them, you can still make a good living, being a poultry farmer. And that's what I want to encourage a lot of women to get into when I go back, finally, hopefully, when I retire. I would really want to form a women's cooperative and encourage them. But I also think one of the reasons that those things fail is because we also fail to train them well. When you give someone chickens, you just don't give them chickens. You tell them, okay, chickens can get sick. There are these diseases. This is what the diseases look like. This is what you need to feed them. If you see them look a little bit groggy, you should call the veterinarian. So you need to show them pictures, have sessions with them, train them, not just on the disease side, on the production side, but also on the business side. Bring someone with a good knowledge of doing businesses to come and teach them how to just, maybe record how many eggs they have, how many they're selling, how much money they're making. Have someone who can read and write help them maintain their books. Maybe encourage them to open an account, a bank account. I've done that with a lot of women farmers in Ghana. I was paid by the Ghanaian government to go and work on a microcredit poultry scheme about a couple of years ago. And it was a very, very successful scheme. But when the government changed, the new people that took over did not think poultry was important, and so they dropped the project. But it was a very, very wonderful project, and the farmers did really well.
What part of Ghana was that?
It was in the Volta region.
Okay. That's where I went to school at.
Oh, where?
I went to Cape Coast.
Oh, you went to Cape Coast, okay. Yeah, they're doing a really good job in Ghana. There's a lot of farmers, but I think the poultry industry in West Africa is really in Nigeria and in Senegal. Yeah. Those two countries are doing very, very well with their poultry. We still are not meeting the demand. That's why we have a lot of imported poultry. But I think the local poultry can, the problem is they cannot compete very well with the imported poultry. The imported poultry can be sold cheaper because the production costs locally are very high. Mm-hmm. But I would prefer to spend my money on a locally grown chicken than buy an imported one. So that's what we have to convince our people of, But, it always comes down to what people can afford. So if you approach a poor family and show them an imported chicken that's selling for $2 and a locally grown chicken that's selling for $10, which one do you think they're going to buy?
They'll buy the cheap one.
Yeah, they'll buy the cheap one. So we have to find a way and find means to make it cheaper to raise chickens, and then we'll have a better industry. The only way Nigeria and Senegal could do it was to ban imports. So importation of chickens is banned in both Nigeria and Senegal, and so that has allowed them to grow their local poultry production facilities.
Oh, okay. Now, just to move on just a little bit, I've heard you talk so many times on my brother's program, Sol Baji. I listened to the one you did last year and the one you just did yesterday. And like poultry and veterinary medicine are not the only things that you talk about. There are other things that you advocate for. things like women leadership, for women to be leaders, things like self-sufficiency in Africa, for us not to be depending on all of these aids. And you are a very big advocate also in terms of education and these STEM programs.
Of course. Yeah, so, I will like to think that I'm a well-rounded person. And of course, in the United States, the educational system produces very well-rounded people. And that's why I think the American educational system, to me, is a little bit superior. Some people will disagree with me, the people that went to school in England, but it allows you to do so many things. You're not pushed into specializing very early on. In your undergraduate years, you do a lot of things. One of my best subjects in undergraduate, even though I was studying biology, was anthropology. I really loved anthropology. I took a lot of anthropology classes, and I still regret that I did not have a double major and majored in anthropology also. I know quite a few people who have degrees in anthropology who are medical doctors. I think one mistake we make with our educational system that we have in Gambia is that if you study science, that's all you could be, a scientist.
Yes.
And that's not true, because in the United States, they're encouraging people who are in the arts and in the humanities to enter medical schools because they think that they make better doctors. They have better bedside manners. And so that's the push now here for students to be just as versed in sciences as in the humanities to enter into the medical profession. And in the veterinary profession, I've had some of my classmates were history majors. So just because you did history doesn't mean you have to be a history teacher. You can do history and be a veterinarian. So that's the way I see myself. Just because I'm a vet, it's not going to stop me from being interested in women's affairs, from being interested in education, from being interested in other spheres of life. So I would not call myself very narrow when it comes to my interests.
So with our education system, I just want us to touch there a little bit, because I myself, I have a little bit of problem with the way they teach our kids, and I'm not sure if you will agree with me on this or not, but we are mostly teach just to pass exams.
Of course,
we are taught just to pass these exams, and from there, we go and collect all these degrees, and before we know it, we all think that we're all big bosses now.
Well, we have a very academic-oriented educational system that is not producing people with skills to do anything.
Exactly. We are not producing guys who will go and innovate things out there.
Exactly. It's a very theoretical type of educational system. You do a lot of cramming and memorizing, and we are not allowed to think analytically. We don't analyze stuff. When I see what my kids went through, even though it took me a while also to get used to the American system, I thought it was a little bit too lax in the beginning. I was in a hurry for my kids to learn the times table, like I did when I went to school in Gambia. But they took their time. The teachers took their time in teaching them the times table. It was not rammed down their throats, It's not like you come in the morning and you have a quiz about the times table. We all had to stand up in Gambia. In elementary school, you had to stand up every morning, and the teacher will ask 3 times 2, 5 times 5, and if you couldn't say the right answer, they will like hit you on the head or
exactly.
It's called mental drill.
I know, but it was very stressful for everyone involved.
And it is still going on there.
That's awful. That's an awful way to teach young people. And I like the way they teach kids here. They really encourage them. Teachers hug the kids. They're the children's friends. The kids are not scared of their teachers.
Exactly.
And I think that makes for a better learning environment. And to this day, I think in most parts of Africa, especially in the former British colonies, you still have people who are scared of their professors. They're scared of their teachers. That should not be. Teachers should be warm. That's what teaching is all about, and caring and open to talking with their students and explaining things to them, and they will have a better atmosphere in the classroom, and kids will learn better because children learn better between the ages. It's been studied, it's been researched that they absorb more between the ages of 3 to 8 years old. They are sponges.
Yes.
They can do anything. They can learn new languages. They can, and that's the time when our teachers get these kids to be scared of them. So, and then of course they introduce this learning rote memorization, which doesn't help much. I mean, it's good to memorize certain things. You need to memorize maybe formulas and things like that. But I think there's also they need to pay attention to how creative these kids are at that time of their lives in elementary school, and allow them to be a little bit more creative. Encourage them to do projects, science projects. They can do science projects using very simple things in their environment. Why don't you tell them to have a competition, put them in groups, how to make cars from Tara. I used to see these little boys will make beautiful cars, get them to compete in making those cars, encourage them. You see a lot of creativity in our kids at play when they're playing at home. Bring that into the classroom, and so there's a lot to do. We need just a total revamp. We're just following a formula that the British left for us to produce civil servants.
Yeah,
and we just don't need civil servants anymore in Gambia. Not everyone should be a civil servant.
Exactly.
We need bricklayers. We need people that are versed in construction. We need a lot of engineers. We need a lot of car mechanics. Now all the cars are computerized, so we need a lot of computer education, and so there's just so much, to do instead of just the same old type of educational system where you go and learn math and English. And when I was in school, we used to have a course called oral English. Now that I think about it, I think that was the stupidest class that we ever took. Why do you want to change my accent?
Oh.
I speak like a Gambian. I'm going to speak like a Gambian forever.
Exactly. That's right.
You cannot change. They were basically trying to change our accent to make us talk like British.
Right. Yeah, I think that just the way that you were talking about it, this system has been there for almost 100 years now. The way that our grandparents were taught, that's the same way our kids are being taught today.
No, nothing much has changed. I think they've just changed, for example, the way the classes are set. For example, now it's up to grade 12, like the American system.
Right. But
that's just a cosmetic change. I don't think much has changed.
Exactly.
And we're still pushing the kids towards very academic-oriented careers. We need more people going into technical areas. There are so many services that are needed for a growing country like ours. We need a lot more people versed in technology.
Yes.
Learning about construction.
Yes.
There are people who go to school here for construction. We have some friends that went to a local community college here that studied construction, and they work in the construction industry. If you see all the houses being built in Gambia, if you have a few experts in construction, we need people that know about urban planning. I don't think there's maybe there are now people who study regional city and regional planning and urban planning. That's what countries are doing. They're sending their people out here. I meet so many Indonesians, and almost all of them come to Cornell to study city and regional planning. And they go back and they're helping their countries plan their cities with this growing population that we have in the world. So there's so many other professions out there that we have not even tapped into. And I will also make a plug for veterinary medicine. It's still a very slow growing profession in the Gambia. Not many people enter that profession. So just so much that we still have to do. And it includes revamping that educational system and including agriculture as a class right from the very beginning. I mean, in elementary school, I took agricultural science in high school, but I think we need to start in elementary school. Can you imagine teaching primary 1, primary 2 kids about gardening, and them having like their own school garden that they will take care of? They have a class where they go out and they water the garden. And not only that, they can learn about how plants grow. They can learn about how a bean grows.
And they will have a lot of fun doing that too.
They'll have a lot of fun doing that. Yeah. They can raise a few chickens there to have eggs. They can feed them the eggs. When I think about these things, I'm like, oh my God, there's just so much we can do. And they can start doing it now. I'm sure there's a teacher, I know they're overworked and so on, who'll be glad to start a little garden in an elementary school in Gambia. Or start, put some 2 or 3 chickens in there and say, okay, kids, these are your chickens. These are your flowers. These are your plants. Can you take care of them? And if they do that in all the schools, they can have competitions. Who has the best vegetables? Who has the best looking chickens? Because that's what the kids do here for their 4-H programs. They take care of the chickens. They make sure they're clean. And then they go take them to competition. And they say, who has the biggest eggs? Who has most eggs? So in fact, here they're not doing it in the school, but they do it as part of these 4-H programs. And 4-H programs are usually associated with universities. Like Cornell University, where I am right now, we have what we call the Cornell Cooperative Extension. And it has extension programs in every county in New York State. And they help with these 4-H programs. So that's my dream, to come to Gambia and start a 4-H program and include every school, every district in Gambia, and make sure that our young people are exposed to agriculture at a very, very early age. If we can feed ourselves, we are on the right path to development. That's the first thing you need to do to be a developed country. You cannot bring in technology from outside that is not sustainable and expect to be developed. You have to develop your own.
Yes.
And the best way to develop our own is to first of all feed ourselves. It's very important for kids to be well fed, to be intelligent. Nutrition has a lot to do with intelligence.
Oh yes, it does.
Yes, I don't need to belabor the fact that there's been a lot of research done.
Yes.
That if kids are malnourished, their brain does not grow. They cannot reach their capacity. So if our children are well fed, we'll have kids that are not going to be sleeping in class because they're hungry. Their brains are going to work more, and we'll have more innovation, along the line.
Yes,
so
most definitely. These are things that that my brother Sol Baji always advocates for on his program every Saturday. About feeding and making sure that these kids have very comfortable environments, before they come to school and all of these things. And
good nutrition is number one.
And I really appreciate you bringing that point up. And for the folks out there who may want to know anything about this 4-H program that you are mentioning, the website is 4-H.org. Yeah. So I have looked into it before. It's a really good program. I've shown my kids how it works and all of those things, and hopefully down the road we will try to sign up. And
you can get them signed up. Sometimes they have programs during the summer.
Yes.
Summer camps, 4-H summer camps that the kids can sign up with. But can you imagine if we do that all over the Gambia? Every school, all these children raising this, and even going home and doing it at home and telling their parents, can I have a garden in that corner? Can I have 1 or 2 chickens that I can raise? The discipline also that's going to inculcate in them, because it's also all about discipline. If you have an animal to raise, you are going to be disciplined because you have to feed that animal. You have to make sure they have food, they have water.
Yes.
So I think that's much better than them sitting and playing video games.
Exactly. There's one thing that the former president used to say, and I know a lot of people don't agree with some of his policies and all the things that he has done. But there's one thing that he used to say that I agree with him. That you grow what you eat and eat what you grow.
Yeah, I know. He had a good idea with that.
Yes.
But he himself, that was the problem. He was saying that, but all the agriculture that he was doing was for his own good.
Exactly.
It was not spreading to the people. Now, if he had done that and let it spread to the people, it would have been good. but he was selling all the produce that was coming from all these gardens and so on.
Well, he was a businessman too, so
yeah, putting it in his pockets. If he had extended that to the primary schools, to the high schools,
yes,
it would have been good. But it was just a slogan as far as he was concerned.
Yes, most definitely. Dr. Jagne, we're about to come to the end of this program. Before we go, I would just like to pick your brain just for a little bit with a little bit of trivia questions. Hopefully, it wouldn't take too much time. So my first question is, imagine that your kids or your grandkids are listening to this interview, maybe 10, 20 years or 30 years from now. What are some of the life lessons you would want them to get from this?
I would say, first of all, when it comes to kids, I think raising kids to be disciplined is number one. When your child is young and you let them stay up until midnight, it's not good.
Especially kids, playing video games.
Yes, kids have to go to bed at a certain time. Maybe the youngest one's 8 o'clock. Maybe older ones, you can let them stay up till 9 o'clock. If they have homework, if they're in high school, maybe they can stay up to midnight. But doing homework, I see a lot of indiscipline in a lot of our children. So discipline is number one. And that has to start early on. You cannot wait until the kid is 10 years old, 12 years old to discipline them. And I see a lot of our children not doing any work at home, not being responsible. I would say responsibility is the second one. I see a lot of kids growing up in a maid culture where the maid does everything. The kids don't do anything. So even if you have a maid, I know we need maids because in Gambia we don't have all these machines that help us reduce our work time. We don't have washing machines for our clothes. We don't have. So you might need someone to help wash the clothes and so on. But it doesn't mean that you don't give your children responsibility. They need to be still responsible. For example, let them make their own bed. Why do you have to have a maid making a child's bed? Let them clean their own room. All those things. Help in the kitchen. I shouldn't say that because some of my cousins might say, you did not do that when you were young. I did not do that because I was hiding in my room reading. I used to love to read books. So I would rather read a book than go and pound the pepper and the onions. But anyway, if they want to read, let them read, okay?
Right.
Don't force them to do endless chores. But, just a few chores here and there, I think, would be good just to give them some responsibility. So discipline, responsibility are two things that I think we should put in our kids from a very, very early age.
Yeah, most definitely. You just touched on our parents back home not teaching us, especially us boys, how to do some of this housework. I know that my friend over here, he wasn't like that. He was really good at, all of this housework, and if he cooks for you, you will be glad. But somebody like me, I was raised with two mates. I started making my own bed when I came to the States over here. But you see, that should start at home. Exactly.
That should have started when you were in Gambia. Children have to be given responsibilities. If you give someone responsibility, then they will respond in kind. They will be responsible later on in life. But if you don't expect your children to be responsible, they can come out here. For example, in the United States, a lot of kids suffer when they come out here because they were not raised to be responsible.
Yeah, that's right. And like if you look at it, and I don't mean to be very very tribalist, but if you look at it back home, the Aku ethnic group were the ones who used to teach their kids all of these things.
Yeah, they were a lot more strict.
Exactly.
With their kids and had to learn how to do all these things. Well, that's true, and I think that probably might have come from if you're a minority, usually you are very resilient.
Yes.
And wherever you go, minorities tend to be that way. The rest of the population were all, coming from the same religious background, larger ethnic groups. So we don't seem to care. We have this culture that kids, you have to do everything for your kids. But you are right. I went to a school that had a lot of Creoles, and I know I used to go to their homes. Their parents were a lot more strict with them than they were with me.
Yeah,
than my parents were with me.
That's right. My other question before we finish, Dr. Jagne, and thank you for your patience. What will you tell your 25-year-old self today from everything that you've gone through, everything that you know today? There's probably a 25-year-old who's out there listening to you. What will you tell your 25-year-old self?
By the time they're 25, they're probably out of university.
Yes.
I'm hoping.
Yes.
And I think the same thing. I mean, the same discipline and responsibility. The thing is, what I find out is that girls tend to mature faster than boys. And so the girls by that age are very, very mature. I'm not even talking about girls in Gambia, because by 25, many of them get married.
Yes.
They get married very early. But here in the U.S., our daughters are not getting married early. And I see them to be much, much more responsible and more mature. So I will talk to the boys, I think. By the time you're 25, please grow up.
And pull your pants up.
And stop being a mama's boy.
Exactly.
and behave like your sisters who are very focused. Boys tend to be very distracted, and stop playing video games, because there are some people who go into their 30s and they're still playing video games. So, the world is changing. A 25-year-old now and a 25-year-old in 20 years will be so different because of the improvements in technology. Everyone is going to be so savvy about all types of technology, not just computers. So they need to prepare themselves and get the proper education to be able to live in a very high-tech world, a world that will be ruled by science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM. I think that's what we are moving to.
Yes,
we already see that in societies like in China.
That's right.
Where everything is high-tech. They produce thousands and thousands and thousands of probably 100,000 engineers a year.
Yes.
Compared to the U.S. And so that's where the rest of the world is going. We need new technologies to feed the world. We need new technologies to provide housing for the growing populations.
Yes.
So I think that's where a 25-year-old will find themselves.
Okay, so my final question, Dr. Jagne, is what is your favorite song or your favorite movie or your favorite sport?
Now, let me tell you, if the movie industry relied just on me, they will not make any money. To tell you the truth, I cannot tell you the last time I watched a movie. I watch movies when I am flying on an airplane.
Right.
I fall asleep when I go to the movies. My kids... when I used to go with my kids, they would just pinch me because I would be sleeping. As soon as the lights go off, I fall asleep.
Yeah.
So I cannot tell you whether I have a favorite movie. I'd rather watch documentaries. I like documentaries. The last movie I watched was this Queen of Catway. Mm-hmm. I really like that, but only because the woman, the actress, what's the lady from Kenya? What's her name again? She's now very famous.
Lupita Nyong'o?
Lupita. Yeah. I like Lupita.
Yeah,
that's the only reason I went to see it. And I think I slept a little bit, probably maybe like 10 minutes of that movie. But before that, I think my last movie was The Lion King. I went to see with my son when he was about probably 2 or 3 years old.
Oh, gosh.
And my son's name is Samba.
Uh-huh.
And
a
lot of Americans were calling him Simba. So I had a very tough time during the time that Lion King was very popular.
And hopefully...
I prefer music. I prefer listening to music than watching movies. I am not a very sports-like person. I don't like sports.
Do you have any favorite musician or any kind of music you listen to?
I love African music. All kinds of African music.
Like somebody like who?
My favorite is Malian.
Malian music. Do you have any particular artist you like the most?
I like Umu Sangare.
Umu Sangare, okay.
Yes, yeah. But when it comes to sports, I will watch, for example, the finals of the NBA. I will watch maybe the Super Bowl a little bit. I love to watch the Olympics.
Yes.
You know, I love to feel track and field.
Yes.
But that's it. That's my involvement in sports. My son used to play a lot of soccer, but my husband was the one who used to take him. So you hear about soccer moms.
Yes.
But I was not a soccer mom.
So what do you do on your leisure time?
I read a lot.
Okay. Oh, great.
Yeah. I still read a lot. And I think that's one of the other things that we're losing fast with computers and new technology. Our children are not reading. They're just playing games on their computers. And the best way to develop your language skills, whether it's English and French or in Wolof, whatever, is to read.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
We should not forget about that. Reading is very, very, very important. We should still encourage our children to read, especially those of us who live in the United States.
Yes.
They need to read so that they can communicate well. They'll be able to speak English well. Despite the fact that I would love my kids to be very, very fluent in Wolof and in Mandinka and in Pearl, we live in the United States. We have to face the reality.
Yes.
Our children have to speak English, and they have to speak it well.
Yes.
If you speak English well here in the society, you are respected.
Yes.
And it helps with your education. Show me a good reader or someone who reads well or reads a lot of books, and I'll show you the child who does the best in the class.
That's right.
Usually they're at the top of the class.
That is true.
Kids who are good readers, yeah. It's very important. It's the basics of education, is you have to know how to read and write.
Most definitely. I'm pretty sure my friend Solbaji will really appreciate this, because these are the things that we talk about every Saturday about reading, you know. But somebody like me, even though I'm into reading, me and my co-host over here, we're into reading, but I usually listen to audiobooks more now because of time, you know, and those kind of things. So
yeah, I don't have time either. I'm very busy, but I have a stack of books in my bedroom, and I try to read when I'm traveling. You know, I take books with me all the time. So I always try to find, you know, every short break, maybe if I have a break. It might take me sometimes weeks, when I was younger, it would take me probably a day to read a book. But now it might take me weeks because I just don't have the time. But I really enjoy reading books. I enjoy reading. My favorite books are books about the immigrant experience.
Yes, because yesterday I heard you recommend a book by Dambisa Moyo.
Dambisa Moyo, she wrote a book, Dead Aid. Yeah, that's more about Africa and our dependence on external aid, which is really not external aid, because the people that are giving us the money are only aiding themselves.
That's right.
They're not aiding us. So that's a really great book.
Oh yeah.
Moyo is a really very astute Zambian.
Yes.
She's doing lots of work. She wrote some more books after that.
Yes, she does. I've been following her work for a long time, and she's really good. So now we'll just let you give your last words, Dr. Jagne, to the folks out there, folks in Gambia, folks over here, you know, just whatever you want to throw out there to them.
Yeah, I just want to say that whenever I visit Gambia, I see so many good things. We have a lot of good prospects we need to take advantage of. We should start, especially our young people, start just thinking more, using their brains more. There's lots to do. There's lots that can be done in that country. Those of us who are here in the diaspora, the same thing. I would just urge everyone here, please encourage your children to get a good education. I think that's the most important here in the U.S. And whatever they do, inculcate in them a love for Gambia and a willingness to help in Gambia. I tried hard to do that with my kids, and I think I've almost succeeded. they talk about going back. and one of them, I always encourage my kids to go and spend some time in Gambia. They used to go when they were young on vacation. If you can afford it, send your kids back home as much as possible. It's the best kind of education. I used to pay a lot of money for children to go to camp, and then I realized I could use that money to pay for them to go to Gambia, and they get they get the best education of their lives when they do that. So if you can, please don't keep your kids here and say, I'm not sending them to Gambia because there are mosquitoes, they're this and that. They need to go and learn. Do you see all these people that work in the Peace Corps that come and spend time in villages in Gambia? Are our kids better than those people? That's what I tell my children all the time. So I convinced my oldest daughter to go. She spent about 6 months. She wanted to spend a year in Gambia, but it was very difficult for her to communicate with people here. In those days, they used to interfere with Viber and Skype and all that. So that's why she came back. I'm trying to convince my second daughter to do the same thing. Go to Gambia for 6 months to a year and just live there. They were younger when they used to go there and just live there as an adult. And I'm hoping my son will do that too. So please, those of us in the diaspora, let's not keep our kids away from Gambia. And those living in Gambia, also encourage your kids. Everyone needs to be well educated. Education should not be a privilege. Everyone should be well educated, and we should not see education as a path to riches. Once we start changing our mentality about that we are going to be educated because we need to be. We have to be. It's not because it's good to be educated to have a good job, but I think everyone needs to learn how to read and write. And the more people in our society that know how to read and write, and it just does not have to be in English. You can learn to read and write in Arabic. You can learn to read and write in Wolof, but it's still important that we do that. And I also will say that you don't have to be young to learn. You can be old and still learn and still be able to get what I would say education in quotes, because some of the older people I meet in Gambia are very intelligent, and people look down on them because they don't know how to read and write. But it's never too late to do that. So let's send our kids to school. They can learn Arabic, they can learn English, whatever, but just make sure they learn something.
Yeah, most definitely. I just want to buttress some of the points that you just made about, there's like you can learn until, whenever.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have an uncle who graduated from college at the age of 50, so that is something that I'm really proud of, that I always like to talk about, that it's never too late,
learning is forever.
Exactly.
Learning is forever. We're still learning. I'm still learning.
Exactly.
I don't know everything in veterinary medicine. I have to go to continuing education classes here to keep my license.
Exactly, because
we're constantly learning.
Right, because if you are just to rely on your degree only, which you got like many decades ago, that will not sustain you. It is obsolete by now.
What I learned in veterinary school is now obsolete.
So it's continuous education.
Yeah, I have to keep up. And that's one of the things that we don't do back home.
Exactly.
Continuous education. You just get your degree and that's it. You
that's
don't
right.
do any further learning.
Yeah, most definitely. So, Dr. Jagne, I wish we had more time. We really, really enjoy, talking to you. So, but we're going to have to cut it short over here. Hopefully, your doors will be open next time we want to talk to you. But we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. We really, really appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very, very, very
inviting me.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.